Good morning. Thank you so much for kicking off your week with us, starting your Monday morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe's off today. We're going to begin this hour in the Middle East, where a new flare-up between the United States and Iran is again threatening to unravel peace efforts. Over the weekend, both sides traded retaliatory strikes, with President Trump warning that the U.S. could be forced to return to war with Iran. On Saturday, CENTCOM released this footage we're showing you of purported strikes on Iran in retaliation for what it says was an Iranian drone attack on a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian military later released this footage of a missile and drone attack targeting U.S. military sites in Kuwait and Bahrain, they say. NBC News has not been able to verify any of the claims. But this morning, multiple news outlets are reporting that both sides have agreed to pause fighting and resume peace talks. NBC News Washington correspondent Alice Barr joins us now with the latest. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. And NBC News has new reporting now this morning from a source with knowledge of the peace talks that the two sides are still set to meet in Qatar in the coming days, though Iran has not yet confirmed that. This morning, hopes for peace with Iran battered by a weekend flare-up in fighting, though a source with knowledge of the talks told NBC News technical teams working toward a long-term deal are still scheduled to meet in Qatar in the coming days, and communication channels are in place aimed at de-escalation. Multiple news outlets are reporting the two sides have agreed to pause the strikes, among them the Wall Street Journal, citing officials from the U.S. and other countries involved in negotiations. Iran has not confirmed an agreement. Vice President Vance on Friday downplayed the disruption, saying a ceasefire
is always going to be a little messy when you're dealing with the Iranians. But if we make the final deal, then great. If we don't make the final deal, their nuclear program is still destroyed. They're still much weaker as a country.
The two sides have been in detailed talks over the future of Iran's nuclear program following the signed Memorandum of Understanding initial agreement, though on Saturday, President Trump warned the U.S. could be forced to militarily complete the job, accusing Iran of violating the ceasefire after an attack on a ship in the Strait of Hormuz late last week. U.S. forces then fired on Iranian military targets, with Iran striking back against U.S. Gulf allies Bahrain and Kuwait. On Capitol Hill, Republicans largely backing the administration's approach.
This is almost just a mop-up operation. We have to press them. If they strike us, we have to strike them back by 10.
As some voice concerns.
So there's a lot of work to be done, and I just fundamentally do not trust the Iranians.
With the path to lasting peace uncertain. Picture Israel has continued its strikes in southern Lebanon. The Israeli military says it destroyed what it called an underground Hezbollah terror complex with hundreds of weapons in tunnels. Hezbollah called the strikes a flagrant violation of the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon. Savannah.
So, Alice, what it really seems like you just laid out there is that President Trump sort of alternating between threatening Iran, but then also praising the negotiations, saying they're moving forward. How does that factor into this overall picture, this push for peace?
Yeah, that has been the story back and forth, and Iran has more than once stepped back, including during the first big round of peace talks Vice President Vance led a week ago when Iran accused President Trump of breaking this interim agreement just by his threats. Though the president has frequently said the talks are going well, he believes Iran really wants to make a deal and is going to be forced into that. A White House spokesperson said President Trump is a master deal maker, and she said that his predecessors had regularly outlined their playbook, their red lines to the press, and she said by extension to our adversaries, and that President Trump was maintaining strategic ambiguity and flexibility in his approach.
All right, Alice, thank you so much for kicking us off this hour. Well, over the weekend, President Trump nominated former Oklahoma State Trooper Lance Schroyer, who's a close ally of Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin, to become the director of ICE. Plus, Republicans are saying President Trump could sign that newly passed bipartisan housing bill into law this week. We've got a lot to get to out of Washington. For more, let's bring in NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, good morning. So let's start there. It's called the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. So President Trump refused to sign it last week. Yesterday, we did hear House Speaker Mike Johnson say the president will sign the bill this week. Walk us through what's happening here, since it's this popular bill, it passes bipartisan support and a veto-proof margin. So what's the latest?
Yeah, that's all correct, of course, Savannah. The important thing to know here is that President Trump will technically, under the law, have 10 days from the time he receives the bill, from the time it's transmitted from the House to the White House, which could be as early as today, to either sign it, to veto it, or to let it become law by doing nothing in those 10 days. Now, remember, this bill passed both the House and the Senate with more than 90% of votes in both chambers. It's an overwhelming bipartisan and bicameral vote. So if the president were to veto it, the possibility of an override is very much in play because, of course, you need 2/3 of a majority to override that veto. Republicans see a lot in this bill to celebrate, as do Democrats. The key planks are there are funding and grant programs to build more housing. It eases regulations and review processes, which many in the GOP are particularly pleased about. And there are restrictions on private equity and Wall Street investors buying single-family homes. It's a rare opportunity for Republicans to claim a tangible victory on the issue of affordability and costs ahead of the 2026 midterms, which many of them are very eager to do. So if President Trump were to try to escalate this and veto it and force an override vote, it would make a lot of Republicans even more upset and even more disenchanted about the landscape in the midterms.
Sahil, a lot of this was caught up with the president essentially trying to get other business done in exchange sort of for signing this. And so this is really the president trying to push through what's called the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or our viewers might know it as the Save America Act. It proposes requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. Is that bill going anywhere in Congress?
The short answer is no. It's going nowhere. And that's an important distinction that you make, Savannah, because the president is not saying the housing bill is a bad bill. He's not making the case against that bill. He's simply saying he has a bigger priority, the Save America Act, which he's repeatedly tried to attach to one piece of legislation that's moving, another piece of legislation that's moving. All that happens is that so-called must-pass piece of legislation always stalls because the Save America Act is vehemently opposed by Democrats. It doesn't have anywhere near the 60 votes needed to clear a filibuster in the Senate, and Republican senators have made abundantly clear they do not have the votes nor the desire to abolish the filibuster to push it through. So this remains a priority of the president. He continues to demand that it move, that it get attached to this or that other piece of legislation, but there's no expectation, there's no reason to believe that that's going to happen.
Sahil, let's tick through some of this other Washington news. On Saturday, President Trump, as I mentioned, nominated former Oklahoma State Trooper Lance Schroyer to head ICE. In a social media post, he called him a patriot with years of experience. What can you tell us about him and that experience?
Well, as you say, he's a former Oklahoma State Trooper. He's a current senior advisor to DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin. President Trump said in a social media post, quote, "He is a patriot with real operational experience and a proven leader with decades of experience." It's worth noting that Schroyer's experience is more in local than federal law enforcement. Also worth noting that President Trump is already on his third acting ICE director in just a year and a half back in the White House. Currently, it's David Venturella, who took over from Todd Lyons earlier on this year. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of upheaval surrounding this agency, Savannah.
No kidding. Also, ICE actually has not had a Senate-confirmed director since 2017. So tell us what timeline we're expecting for that nomination process. And you know, just remind us some of the issues that Schroyer is going to face if he does take over the department.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. 2017, almost a decade that this agency has been functioning essentially on autopilot under acting directors who don't have, you know, the full support of the Senate to be in a permanent role, which means they can't use their full powers in this space. The Senate is gone until July 13th. So the earliest they could even schedule anything would be, or rather even hold a hearing, would be that week. This is the type of nomination that that Senate Republican leaders might try to expedite. He would have to come before the Senate for a confirmation hearing. Of course, this agency oversees immigration enforcement and deportations. It's very easy to imagine that it would be very, very confrontational because the two parties have very different views about ICE. Republicans want it to be more aggressive. President Trump wants a more aggressive mass deportation program. And Democrats, after DHS agents killed 2 Americans in Minneapolis, are insistent on reforms to restrain how ICE goes about deportation. So there'll be a lot of questions. But remember, he just needs 50 votes in the Senate, plus potentially the tie-breaking vote of the vice president to get confirmed. He doesn't need Democrats. Trump just needs to find a nominee who can largely unify Republicans.
Sahil Kapoor from Washington for us, covering a lot. Thank you so much. Well, let's stay in Washington. It is a big week for the Supreme Court. So today actually marks the start of the final week of their term. Several big cases are still awaiting rulings from the conservative majority court. 3 of the 8 remaining cases could have major implications for presidential power. Let's bring in our good friend, NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos, to break down some of these cases, talk about what's left here. Danny, good morning. Great to have you. So a lot of the remaining cases, like I just said, they surround the limits of presidential power. So I'm going to tick through each of these, and we'll kind of talk about the bigger theme here. But let's start with the biggest decision before the court right now. This is President Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship. What would happen if the court ruled in his favor?
This is definitely the flashiest case before the court, but it's the one least likely to represent an expansion of executive presidential power. And that's because the court seemed very skeptical of removing a system that we have where we give birthright citizenship to those people born on U.S. soil. The Trump administration has challenged that, claiming that the Constitution adds an additional requirement and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. In fact, this entire case, litigation, everything comes down to those handful of words, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And if, as the Trump administration argues, those words mean that somebody additionally has to be present lawfully in the United States, it would be a massive change to a settled area of the law since 1898. So this is definitely one to watch, even though if you're betting, the odds are against the administration.
Okay, Danny, let's talk about this next one. We're also waiting ruling on President Trump's attempt to fire Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. So this case centers on what's known as a for-cause standard, meaning a president can't fire someone without a specific justification. Legally, what does that require here?
Yeah, the Federal Reserve Act provides, or Congress provided through the Federal Reserve Act, that the governor can only be fired for cause. And a lot of us are familiar with for cause. If you've worked in government, you may be familiar that it means that the default rule in the United States is that it's at-will employment. And usually at a private employer, you can be fired for any reason, good or bad. But that's a little different when you have for cause entitlement. So everything comes down to whether the Fed governor can be fired at will, or what for cause actually means, because you can imagine that anyone can conjure up their own definition of for cause, and specifically whether pre-office conduct counts for something you can fire somebody. Can you fire somebody for cause at the Fed if they did something untoward before they were even at that agency? So this could end up being a narrow decision limited only to the Fed.
The court's also weighing, Danny, whether heads of what have long been independent federal agencies like the FTC are shielded from being fired by the president. How could the court's ruling impact Trump's executive reach on that one?
This case could overrule another very old case called Humphrey's Executor. And really what I'm watching for is whether the court will carve out just a limitation on executive power around the Fed, because the Fed is a little different than some of these other agencies because of the power that the executive should or could have over the economy. But the bigger question is, if the court grants this executive power to fire someone really for cause and expands the presidential power to determine what for cause is, will that also be expanded to these other agencies? That would represent an even more dramatic expansion of executive power by this court.
So, Danny, to put a button on the overarching theme of these 3 cases of presidential power, during oral arguments, the tea leaves that we can sort of read here, how skeptical was this court, was this conservative court? How skeptical have they been of the Trump administration's arguments?
Well, these are 2 dramatically different areas of presidential power. On the one hand, you think about birthright citizenship. Well, that's something that people have considered so settled. I'm sure you've talked to folks, too, who think that's really up for debate. I think that's been the law for hundreds of years now, literally. So that would be a very big surprise. And I think at oral argument, the conservative justices and all justices were very skeptical of this unilateral expansion of federal power. On the other hand, something like defining what is for cause termination at the level of terminating a Fed governor or some of these other heads of agencies. That's a squishier question, and it's something that the court might be more inclined to give to the president. But I wouldn't be surprised if on the one hand they said, oh no, birthright citizenship survives, the president can't affect that. And then on the other hand, possibly carved out a dramatic expansion of presidential power when it comes to terminating people by giving the president and the executive branch alone the power to determine what is for cause when someone's fired.
Danny, switching gears here, another one awaiting ruling on challenges to laws that ban transgender girls and women from participating in female athletics. What happens if the conservative majority court supports these bans?
There was this case last year called Skermetti that kind of gave us some inkling of where the court might be going. But then again, Skermetti was a less direct discrimination based on transgender status. So in this case, this is a much more direct discrimination, at least according to the challengers, because instead of medical status, this is directly based on if you're transgender, you can or cannot play or be included in this team. So even though the court sort of skirted around this issue last year, they could go in a different direction this time around. But yes, given that this is a conservative court, I wouldn't be surprised if the court sides in favor of being able to discriminate against transgender persons joining or being part of a particular athletic team.
All right, Danny Savello is covering a lot for us. We appreciate it, Danny. Thank you so much. Well, a dangerous and prolonged heat wave is developing over much of the country, which could impact millions over this weekend's 4th of July holiday. It comes after a weekend of torrential rain triggered deadly flooding in Kentucky, prompting more than 60 rescues and evacuations. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster is in Chicago and joins us with the latest. Shaq, good morning. Let's start with the scorching heat that is just roasting much of the country. What are some of the biggest areas of concern, and what are officials doing to help people stay cool?
Well, this is one of the biggest areas of concern right here in Chicago, but this is a system that stretches from the Midwest all the way to the East Coast. Savannah, I just checked right now, and it feels like already, we're at 6 a.m., it feels like 84 degrees here in Chicago, and we are just at the beginning of that. Temperatures will actually hit 90 degrees and feel like triple digits, and it's not just today, but it'll be over the stretch of the next couple of days. That's dangerous conditions for so many, and I mentioned this is something that's extending all the way to the East Coast. So what are officials doing about it? Well, we know there's that network of cooling centers. We're seeing that in Chicago. We also know in New York City, where there's that heat warning and heat advisories also in effect. They have a network of some 300 cooling centers available for folks. We know that city pools are open. I'm sure you saw that video of Mayor Mamdani jumping into the pool while wearing a full suit. There'll be a lot of people doing the same, maybe not wearing the same outfit, but going in, enjoying those pools over the course of the next few days. And what officials are advising folks is essentially treat this severe weather as you would other winter storms or other kinds of storms. Prepare ahead of time, check on your neighbors, stay hydrated. Remember, you want to drink that water before you are thirsty. Take the severe weather as seriously as you would other severe weather events.
Oh, all right. And Shaq, you better heed that advice and get inside after you're done chatting with us. Thanks for being out in the heat. Okay, let's now, the other weather event that I mentioned that just over this weekend, this powerful storm brought deadly flooding to Kentucky. How are the cleanup efforts going there?
Yeah, those cleanup efforts are well underway. I mean, we're talking about a lot of rain that dumped down onto that state Saturday night, more than 8 inches in some areas. Just look at what that has led to, that flash flooding. We also know, and as you mentioned, those are some deadly conditions. We know in one county, for example, there were 2 people who were killed essentially in their basement. Officials saying they drowned because of those conditions. In Madison County, there were some 60 water rescues that officials had to deal with, and there were also some precautionary evacuations by one of the dams there. There was some erosion that they saw because of the water and the quickness that rain and that water flooded in. So that is a cleanup that people are going to have to deal with today. You have the governor of Kentucky putting that state of emergency in effect, activating and mobilizing the National Guard. There's going to be several days of cleanup required for those images that you're seeing on your screen right now.
All right, we are thinking about those people in Kentucky. Shaq, I do also another weather event here. Let's talk about deadly fires burning in the Rockies. What can you tell us about the 3 firefighters who were killed in Colorado over the weekend?
Yeah, this was from a fire that we're seeing along the Colorado and Utah border. According to the Wildfire Service, we know that 3 firefighters were killed. 2 others were injured in essentially what they're calling a burnover incident. Essentially, the conditions are so unpredictable with that dry humidity, the heavy winds, that it's leading to those dangerous conditions for firefighters as well as for so many people. We know that's another area where evacuations are underway. This is a massive wildfire. We know the largest wildfire is some 92,000 acres. For a little comparison of that size, that's about 6 times the size of Manhattan, and that fire is 0% contained according to officials. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in helping to contain this fire, and unfortunately it doesn't look like those conditions are improving. Savannah?
All right, Shaq Brewster for us again. Go get cool. Thank you so much. For more on what to expect from the heat this week, let's get a look at our morning news now weather. We have meteorologist Violetta Yaz with us this morning. Hi there. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Good morning. We are looking at fairly intense conditions here in the next couple of days. What's happening is we have this big dome of high pressure that's really going to set the stage for the heat that's coming through the next couple of days. So this is going to dominate across the southeastern U.S. And what happens in these situations is we have that sinking air under the dome that traps this very hot air at the surface, allowing for the relentless heat to develop and, in our case here, spread through the next couple of days. 139 million people at risk for prolonged heat, as a lot of these are going to be in effect at least through Thursday. Heat indices potentially up to 114, and you can see those alerts stretch from the upper Midwest through parts of Minnesota all the way down through parts of Florida. Eventually, that is going to start to expand east, but it's not just about the temperatures. We also have this influx of moisture that's going to be coming in from the Gulf of Mexico, allowing for the high temperatures to combine with very high humidity. So dangerously hot as early as today in some spots, with those heat indices up to 108, even all the way up in Minneapolis, down through Mobile, 107, triple digits here in Jacksonville, Houston, and Oklahoma City as well. Meanwhile, later this week, we'll see that heat spread into the eastern United States. So again, we can expect triple digit air temperatures, plus the humidity making it feel worse. So even in places like New York and D.C., we'll see these very, very high readings, making it dangerous to be outdoors for prolonged periods of time. You want to make sure you're taking this seriously. Meanwhile, in terms of the storm threat, that has shifted east since yesterday. So we do have the potential for some isolated damaging storms here across the upper Midwest, the Dakotas, and parts of Minnesota. Meanwhile, looking ahead, of course, a big week for travel ahead of the holiday. We have spotty storms in the forecast as we head into Friday. Again, luckily no major storms on the horizon as a lot of people hit the roads and the airports. And then looking ahead to the 4th of July, we'll have a couple of isolated spots as well, some scattered storms in the plains and the Midwest, maybe up across the Northeast as well. I think a better chance for some potential delays here across the Southeast from Florida, extending out across the Gulf Coast. Savannah.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.